It is Tuesday, March 10th. This is the Christian Commute. I am your host, Seth Dunn, and you are riding home with me. And, I'm in my dad's truck. And it's taped. Listen, I'm at that age where I can't figure out how to drive things if it's new. Maybe this happens to some of you where you're in one of these cars where it has buttons to shift gears, and you reach for the column to pull the stick down to shift gears, and it's not there. And that's what the pause was when I was this is the Christian Commute. It's Thursday. This is Seth. And I didn't say anything because I was trying to figure out how to make this car go. When my dad goes to Arizona, he asks me to drive his vehicles so the batteries don't die, and his vehicles are infinitely nicer than mine. And you have to understand that my vehicles are just the ones that he gave me because he bought new ones. So, I mean, it just goes without saying that his vehicles are nicer than mine. So I'm in his black edition Honda Ridgeline with the Android Auto that you don't have to plug into. And I am heading to my house, and then heading to the Little League baseball park, and then heading to my basement to do more work. And I do not have a full show for you today. The inbox is empty, as it has been for some time. I also didn't have a show Friday, even though I came to work. Here's what happened. Thursday, I think I had a therapist appointment Thursday. I don't remember. Friday, I came to work. Friday, I drove home and started recording an episode, and then my wife called me, and I just talked to her instead. What with all the things we have to do in the evening, I haven't really talked to my wife much. So, women, by the way, this is just my opinion. This is not me exegeting the Bible, okay? And maybe I shouldn't be putting how my wife feels onto all women, because I think that's a mistake sometimes people make. So, one woman does this, so they're all that way. It's a logical fallacy. Nevertheless, I think that women want their husbands to talk to them, but that's not true. They want to talk at their husbands. Not have a conversation. They want to talk, and they want their husbands to listen to what they're saying. Okay? I think that's what women want. So instead of doing my podcast, which is what I want to do, I talked to my wife, and by saying talk to my wife, I listened to the things she was saying. I didn't get many words in. This is me. I don't need to talk to my wife. Unless I need to tell her something like, stop spending so much money, or where's my stuff that you probably moved. Okay? And I'm not going to put that on all men, but I'm going to make a generalization here. Women want more interaction with their husbands than men want with their wives, as far as a desire and craving and emotional needs and whatnot. I think that's true. So sorry guys, on Friday I put the emotional needs of my wife over you getting a show. And it's probably best for everybody, because I didn't have a very good show topic, and I got a good one today. Today's show title is Josh Howerton and Moonie Marriage. Josh Howerton and Moonie marriage. This is what I'm about to talk about. It's the logical extension of megachurch life. And as always, we have the Bible chapter review. We're going to be in Luke chapter 11, verses 45 through 48, and it's Tuesday, so it's time to remind you to gimme money, not for my pocket, not to support this podcast, but to support the Y Project. YCrosspoint.com, YRockbridge.com, YNorthPoint.org, and YElevation.com. There are out there seeker-sensitive Ayatollah of rock and roll, coffee bar, goat churches in the purple haze, led by Pastor Electric Blue. And by the way, this Josh Howerton's church is one of them. It's one of them. So we need these little websites to tell people, don't go to this multi-site church with their little scheme and their little branding and their online campus and a pastor you don't even know. Don't do that. So that's the Why Project. Luke chapter 11, verse 45 through 48. Jesus, in the preceding verses, has rebuked the Pharisees for basically being holy on the outside but wicked on the inside. One of the lawyers, so this is a teacher of the law, not a Pharisee, it's a teacher of the law. The Pharisees are a religious sect, like the Sadducees, like the Essenes. The teachers of the law are the people who are interpreting the laws. I mean, they're all wrapped up with the Pharisees and their legalism. One of the lawyers said to him in reply, "Teacher, when you say this, you insult us too." Teacher, when you say this, you insult us too. Well, when you say what? When you say you're like graves, like you're like graves that people are walking over, that they wouldn't walk over otherwise. That's what Jesus had said. But Jesus said, "Woe to you lawyers as well! For you weigh men down with burdens hard to bear, while you yourselves will not even touch the burdens with one of your fingers. Woe to you! For you build the tombs of the prophets, and it was your fathers who killed them. So you are witnesses and approve of the deeds of your fathers, because it was they who killed them, and you build their tombs." Now I'm going to end it right there at verse 48, because I don't like these reviews to get too long. But the full meaning is not here until you get to verse 49 and beyond, because the next word out of Jesus' mouth is "for." And he's going to give an explanation. He's going to give an explanation of God's actions. He's going to give an explanation of what happened in ancient Israel. All right. And you're saying, well, you're already talking about ancient Israel. Well, ancient before this. The general idea, by the way, is that the fathers of the Pharisees and teachers of the law, they rejected the prophets. And Jesus is there now, and he's rejecting them. We'll get to that. And that has bearing on what Jesus is saying about the tombs of the prophets. Okay. So here, the teachers of the law, they recognize that Jesus, when he's condemning the Pharisees, is condemning them as well. And this goes, "Oh, wait a minute. You know you're condemning us too. Did you mean to also condemn us? Because you are. What do you think you're saying? Do you know who I am?" That's the feeling I get from that. Do you know who you just insulted? Do you know who I am? Like somebody standing outside the nightclub. What do you mean I'm not on the list? Do you know who I am? Jesus, you came to this Pharisee's house, and you didn't ceremonially wash your hands. And when he said something about it, you basically called him a big phony. And talked about what they do. Don't you get that you're condemning us as well? And yes, Jesus understood he was condemning them as well. So he says, "Woe to you lawyers as well." And he said, you put burdens on these people. You come up with all these laws that people have to do to make their life harder. You got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this. And you put burdens on these people. He says, but you won't even touch the burdens with your finger. Like, you have no sympathy for these people. You can't be bothered to have any compassion on the people you weigh down. It's like you won't even lift a finger to help them. In other words, you're phonies too. And then he says they build the tombs of the prophets. So what does that mean? It means that the prophets are buried in these tombs, and what is it to build the tomb? Like they decorate the tombs, like they respect the tombs. The tombs are these revered places. This is where the prophets are buried. Okay, and Jesus reminds them, like, I was talking about putting flowers on the graves the other day, where they wouldn't walk around in a graveyard, obviously, but they give reverence to these tombs. They build these monuments for the prophets. And we do have this today. When you go to a graveyard, you see monuments. In fact, graveyard companies are sometimes called monument companies, because calling like Wilson Monuments sounds a lot better, more marketable than Wilson Headstones. That's kind of sad. They're monuments. And you go to a graveyard and there's statues there. There's monuments. So they had monuments too, but not for everybody. Just for these prophets. Because, not for Joe Blow. You have monuments to the prophets. You respect their tombs as holy places. But it was your fathers who put them there, who killed the prophets, and you're just like them. More on that when we get to verse 49 and beyond, Lord willing, tomorrow or Friday. Not tomorrow, Thursday or Friday. It's Wednesday. I'm getting ahead of my days here. All right. Now let's move on to Josh Howerton and Moonie marriages. So I bet a lot of you are familiar with Josh Howerton. Short videos of him giving his opinion while wearing a cool hat have probably popped up in your Facebook feed or your Twitter feed. And you just chuckled, Monica, because they've popped up in your feed, and you notice he's got his Bash Pro Shop hat on. Okay? Josh Howerton is a megachurch pastor. I don't know if he's young, but he's younger looking. And he's branding himself lately as sort of the American everyman who has masculine hobbies like hunting and fishing and wants to be a good father. That's how he's branding himself in Texas. He's in Dallas. His church is called Laekpoint. Not that Laekpoint. Not Joel Osteen. All right. Lakepoint's another one of those church names that there's a million of them, like Cross Point, Life Point. Lakepoint's one. We have a Laekpoint Church in Cartersville. All right. And I think Joel Osteen is Joel Osteen's church is Lakewood, isn't it? It's Lakewood. We used to have a Lakewood amphitheater here, but it's Lake something. There's a lake. We have a point, or there's a woods, and we're going to name it that. So he has one of these non-denominational, generic name church, Laekpoint. I don't go to Dallas Baptist. I go to Laekpoint. Pastor is Josh Howerton. Preaches in jeans and a Bash Pro Shop hat because it's cool. All right. So he's going for something. By the way, these guys rebrand themselves. You have to go back. You can look on the interwebs, because when Black Lives Matter happened, Josh Howerton was all about it. You can look it up. He was supportive of it. But now he's rebranded himself to the guy who votes for Trump and shops at Duluth Trading Company, because that's who advertises on the SEC football game. If you've ever seen, I think it's either the last or second to last episode of Mad Men, where Don Draper goes from working at his small little boutique agency to going to work at McCann Erickson, which is this massive ad agency, this big corporate ad agency. And he went from being somebody special to just another cog in the wheel. And he's sitting in a room with all these directors. And there's just this obnoxious guy sitting there giving a profile of their target market guy. This guy's like this, and this guy's like that. The dude he's talking about is basically Josh Howerton, and who Josh Howerton's trying to reach. And when you are a mega pastor with a mega staff, what do you have? You have people who work for you in software who can take your sermons and podcasts and clip them and put them on Facebook Reels and Twitter Reels. So it's no accident that this guy's showing up lately. He's branded himself to do it, and he has his workers making little reels of what he says. And a lot of what he says is very appealing to people like me, even conservative evangelicals. And he makes it seem like he's going against the grain. He's really not. He's talking to cultural conservatives in the South. He's really marketing himself to people who already agree with him. And we have a tendency to do this in evangelicalism. Boy, our pastor's really bold. He's saying stuff that the world doesn't agree with, that they reject. This isn't what they put on the NBA or the NBC and all the gay shows on Disney. He stands up against it. No, he's saying it to you, Baptist, in your Baptist church. He's preaching to the choir, and you think he's bold because you're afraid to say the same thing at work. And that's how Josh Howerton has positioned himself. Does he really believe what he says? I don't know. Did he really believe how great Black Lives Matter was? When you have a staff of people who clip the things you say, and when you have consultants who have you dress in a certain way to seem like you dress that way, I don't really believe all the things you're saying. How about this? I might believe the things you're saying, but I don't believe you believe the things you're saying. I believe the Bible, and if what you're saying lines up with the Bible, that's fine. And even Paul says, some people preach Christ for for selfish gain. Some people preach Christ for selfish gain. At least Christ is preached. So here's something that happened at his church very recently. This is in the last couple weeks. They had a mass marriage ceremony where 50 couples, 50 plus couples got married at the same time in one big ceremony. And the only place I've ever heard of this happening in a so-called church is Sun Young Moon. So there's a cult in South Korea. It's not as popular now. The Unification Church. It was run, he's now dead, by the Reverend Sun Young Moon. And they used to have mass weddings. People would join the cult, and the cult would find men and women and say, all right, you're going to marry him, you're going to marry him, you're going to marry him. And they'd line them up in a big room, and they'd say, all y'all are married. So instead of planning out a ceremony with all your family and friends, that's what they'd do. They'd have a mass wedding. It's also very similar to what's done at some courthouses. Like if you're getting a courthouse wedding, some municipalities, I think Cobb County, Georgia does this. You show up, you get your marriage license, and they say, all right, every Tuesday at 10 o'clock is when the justice of the peace marries people. And like all the people who want to get married come in the room, and he says, all right, all y'all are married now. Let me sign your marriage license. Okay? And that's what happened at Josh Howerton's church. That's the fruit of the megachurch. That's the logical evolution from spontaneous baptism day to spontaneous wedding day. I don't know if you'd call it that, mass wedding day. So you think of these churches, Crosspoint does it, all these Y churches that I talk about. Stephen Furtick's church does it. I'd have to Google it, but I bet Laekpoint does it. I think they do, Howerton's church. People do spontaneous baptism Sunday, where they preach a sermon about how important it is to get baptized. And then they do an invitation like, everybody come get baptized right now. Who needs to get baptized? Come on. Spontaneous. Then they report on how many baptisms they had. Now you think about, in our culture, how baptisms have historically been done. Somebody gives an invitation, all All right, maybe y'all need to get saved, or if you got saved, maybe you need to obey Christ in baptism. Come down. And somebody comes down and says, hey, I need to get baptized. So they say, all right, come over here and we're going to talk to you about your testimony of the Christian faith. We're going to find out about your life, and then we're going to send you to this class about what the church believes. And then after you've properly been catechized, they don't use the word catechized, but that's what it is. It's a catechism. They're checking your life morally. They're making sure you're really saved, or that you seem like you're really saved. And they're catechizing you. And then they're going to schedule a baptism. And that's going to take a couple weeks at least, maybe a couple months. And in that time, you're going to invite all your friends and family to your baptism. It's a familial event. It's a celebration. It's think about the sacraments at Catholic Church, right? When they have baptism, everybody comes. Your whole family comes to see the baptism. There's a sponsor and a godfather. And think about a confirmation. They do that. That's a sacrament too. It's a big deal. All your family's going to come. And think about a wedding. Same thing. It's a big deal. All your family's going to come. And even low church Protestant Baptists, we make a big deal out of our baptisms, even though we're not doing babies and we're not calling it a sacrament. And we usually make a big deal about our weddings in our culture. Now, where in the Bible does it say that you have to plan out your wedding and have this big ceremony? Nowhere. So I'm not saying this is how it's done in the Bible. I'm saying there's a certain amount of reverence and pageantry that goes along with a wedding in our culture, especially a Christian wedding, because typically people who want to get married will go to their pastor and say, we want to get married, and the pastor will say, happy to do it. Let's book the church a few weeks from now, but you have to come to me for counseling, and we're going to talk about if marriage to this person is the right thing for you. And that's pastoral care, guys, because the Bible talks about marriage. The Bible says don't be unequally yoked. And the Bible talks about how a Christian is supposed to treat his wife and how a Christian wife is supposed to treat her husband. So it's good that a pastor would counsel people on that, not just check a box. I'm not saying it's wrong to just get up and get married real fast without a bunch of ceremony. We don't see that in the Bible. And I'm not saying if for a Christian you can't just go down to the justice of the peace and get married. I'm not saying that either. But what I'm saying is we're seeing a shift in the seriousness of things and the intimacy of things. Because usually the pastor of your church who marries you knows who you are. The pastor at the megachurch doesn't know you. Sun Young Moon, when the Moonies are doing their mass marriages, they don't know anything about those people. And now you got these Moonie marriages at Laekpoint after a planned sermon. So when they do spontaneous baptism Sunday, they do a sermon on baptism, they plan it out, they do a topical sermon, and they say, all right, let's hit the number. So this time, what did they do? What did Howerton do? He did a topical sermon on marriage and how it's a sin to be shacked up, and then basically said, all right, y'all come up and get married now. Well, we're at least going to wait a week. All 50 of y'all come get married. He spontaneously got 50 couples to come get married. It's a lot like a spontaneous baptism. And let me ask you this question. Do you think that Facebook clip mega preacher who has a stylist, how do you know he has a stylist, Seth? Maybe he doesn't. I'm guessing he does. All right. Do you think that polished, put together, everything's planned out, big time multi-campus mega pastor sat down with all 50 of those couples and gave them adequate marriage counseling? Or did he sell them on the idea from the pulpit that they need to do something in the same way they do the spontaneous baptisms and get them to do it? Now let me pause. I'm not going to be the devil's advocate here. I'm going to be Pastor Electric Blues advocate. and say, Seth, don't you think that guy knows his people and his context better than you? Don't you think that guy recognized that there were people, that there were couples in his church who were regular attenders who were shacked up and fornicating, and he got up there and said something about it because he wants to get them out of sin and living into Christian marriage? You think they don't have demographers at their church who know that there's a fair amount of shacked up people there? They know. But let me flip that on the other side of the coin. What does it say about the health of this man's megachurch that there are 50 shacked up couples in the congregation? Now, we know these places don't take membership seriously, okay? That it's just people attend the church. They may even serve the church. But as any kind of church discipline and seriousness about church membership is unheard of. Laekpoint Church is the kind of church, and Josh Howerton is the kind of preacher where shacked up people would go and feel comfortable. Now, far be it for me to be a hypocrite. I married some people. I did a marriage ceremony for some people the other day, just a few weeks ago. And I'm not trying to tell their business, okay? But these people were attenders of a church, a Bible-believing church. They had started attending there. They already had a baby together, and they weren't married. And they needed to get married. And they called and asked if I would marry them, and I did. Okay? I'm not saying you tell those people, well, you sinners, you better prove it to me. Or you sinners, you shouldn't even be in church. I'm not saying that. I'm saying, is the church they go to, is it 50 people who were shacked up? Or is there a large percentage of it? If your church is healthy, your pastor doesn't need to give a topical sermon on don't be shacked up. Because there's zero church members who are shacked up. There will be statistically a number of them who are fornicating outside of the bounds of marriage. That's not just sinfulness, it's just statistics, okay? And those people do need to repent, and their fellow church members do need to bear one another's burdens and say, hey, stop that. Either stop fornicating or get married one. Okay, that's fine. I'm not saying it's fine to sin. I'm saying that's reality. Okay. But you should have zero church members who are actively shacked up if your church is healthy. But what Howerton and churches like Howerton's know is there's a bunch of these people. Because it's a social event, they go there and they endure it because they accept. Our society believes this. Yeah, I know I'm not doing right. I agree with our society that I'm not doing right. I used to work with a guy, and he got his girlfriend pregnant, and they weren't married yet. And his dad was a pastor. And he said, well, it's not what I believe, talking about his lifestyle. I'm like, all right, dude, well, marry her. Then they got married, but marry your girlfriend then. Like, what are you waiting on to do the right thing if that's not what you believe? You just said you know it's a sin, so fix it. And just in my personal thing, these people I did the ceremony for, what do you think I did? I sat down with them and I said, this is Christian marriage. It doesn't line up with your lifestyle, obviously, and this is the lifestyle that you need to pledge to each other and to God that you're going to live. So if I'm going to meet somebody to marry them and give them counsel, I'm not going to say, y'all are shacked up, I'm not going to marry you. I'm going to say, hey, y'all are shacked up, and I do Christian marriages, okay? And if you want to go to the courthouse and get married, fine, there's no law against it. But if you want me to do a Christian marriage ceremony, you're going to have to make a covenant with each other and with God, and the first step of that is to start living a Christian life. And you need to be a Christian. If you're not a Christian, You don't need a Christian ceremony. You need to get saved. Because there's other reasons to get married, right? Some Christians are like, well, I want to get married so I can have sex with this girl I like and it not be a sin. There's even lost people have more reasons to get married than that, okay? And we see even cultures that don't have Christianity have marriage because it's a universal thing that got programmed in with Adam and Eve. Men need women, okay? It's how you build up the family unit, okay? That's just how it is. So everybody gets married, lost people and saved people alike. But what I tell people is, first of all, you need to come to Christ. And if one of you's come to Christ and the other hasn't, you don't need to get married. Because you're not supposed to be unequally yoked. And we could have a discussion one day, a theological discussion. This could be a good question if somebody wrote it in. If you know somebody who's a Christian and they have had a child with a non-Christian, are they obligated to get married? Because the Bible says don't be unequally yoked, but at the same time, isn't the quote-unquote right thing to do, make an honest woman out of her and not have your child be an illegitimate bastard? I'm not going down that road right now. I'm just saying there's a lot of counseling that needs to be done about the spiritual condition of people in an ongoing way, and how divorce is unacceptable. More so than I'm going to preach a topical sermon full of statistics about how cohabitation is bad and tell you that you're in sin and then say, come get married right now. Because this is a decision you're making for the rest of your life. Do you get this, guys? The decision to stop fornicating with your girlfriend is a decision you make right now. Maybe for the next few weeks or the next few months. You're not committing to staying with that girlfriend forever. The decision you make to marry your girlfriend is a decision you just made for the rest of your life. Because a Christian marriage is what God has put together, let no man separate. Period. End of sentence. It's permanent. So I want you to ask yourself the question, do you think that mega pastor who preached a spontaneous marriage ceremony or a spontaneous marriage sermon, just like he does in spontaneous baptisms, sat down with those 50 people and made sure they were equally yoked and they were making the right decision? Or do you think that guy talked them into something with an emotional sermon and a certain percentage of them have made a bad life decision that may ruin their lives, the lives of their current or future children, and have lasting effects? Do you think so? Now listen, a certain percentage of people who have the best marriage counseling and planning from their pastor still get divorced because they acted wickedly, all right? Maybe they were false converts. It's hard to live a Christian life, isn't it? Okay? But what I'm saying is, we've turned something holy and special and intimate with spontaneous baptism. Now we've turned marriage into that, we being evangelicalism. Into topical sermon, let's do it. Guys, that's crazy. Now maybe he did counsel all 50 people. Maybe he counseled 100 couples and said, all right, only 50 of y'all should get married. I don't know. I'm just saying math, statistics, time of day. We know they don't do that. We know those type of churches just don't do that. Not from the senior global pastor, anyway. I've told this story. I'm going to tell it again. I went out to a business lunch once with an accounting firm who wanted to do some consulting work for Field Turf. And they contacted me and they say, we do audits of tax credits, I think for natural gas usage. Something I forget what the tax credit was for, but there was tax credits that people were missing out on. And they were making a business of cold calling companies contacting the accounting staff and saying, hey, we offer this service. Can we take you to lunch and talk about it? So they took me to lunch. And remember, when you're the client, you can talk about whatever you want because they're taking you to lunch to get your business. And one of the partners, it was a guy and a girl, accounting partners. They weren't married. The people who worked at the firm, it was a firm out of Chattanooga, a legitimate firm, I forget which one. And the man said, my wife is from New Orleans. And I said, oh, I went to seminary in New Orleans. He goes, oh, you went to seminary? I was like, yeah, I went to New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary. That's where I went. And, you know, I wasn't trying to lead into a gospel conversation. I was just trying to say, you know, New Orleans is its own place, man. If you ever talk to people who've been to New Orleans, like never been there, like you're going to New Orleans, that's a different town full of different kind of people. I'm not saying it's bad or good. I'm saying they're different. But anyway, he got to talking, and this is what he asked. He says, what do you think about Andy Stanley? I'm just like, if I want people, if there's any question out there, if somebody could ask you any question besides what's the gospel so you can evangelize, like what do you think about this? What do you think about Republicans and Democrats? What do you think about SEC football? You know, what do you think about having picture day at Little League because it's stupid? You know, what do you think about Andy Stanley as like kid in a candy store? What do you think? Let me tell you what I think. So I told him he was bad in so many words. And the guy, he told me this. He said, I used to go to Buckhead Church because he used to live in Atlanta. And he says, I used to go to Buckhead Church. And I don't think I would go there now. He goes, here's what I noticed. They never buried anybody or married anybody at Buckhead Church. Now I know maybe they've had funerals or marriages there. But what he was saying is there was no community of people celebrating these life events there. The people showed up on Sunday for the rock show and the Andy Stanley feel-good sermon, but there was nobody who grew up there. People didn't get born there, baby dedicated there, baptized there, meet their wife there, get married there, live there, and die there. So you think about the kind of things that happened in church before the megachurch culture came along. People had life events were at church. The people at your church, a lot of them were your friends in life, not just people who showed up to see the same movie as you. Because that's what church is now, people who show up to the same theater as you, to the same ball game as you. At least that's what megachurch is. And you think about how the Bible doesn't have much, if anything, about marriages and funerals. But what he saw was like, they're not marrying and burying people. Something is off here. And in that same vein, guys, something is off at a church like Laekpoint. They're mass marrying people. After they emote them in a sermon and manipulate them with statistics. I'm not saying sermons are not supposed to be manipulative. Maybe that's a bad word. Sermons are supposed to put you at a decision point. You preach the text, and the decision point is, am I living up to this text or not? Do I need to repent of something? Do I need to make a change in my life? And ultimately, do I need to reject sin and reject the world, accept Christ as the Savior, and repent and become a Christian? Okay, that's the ultimate decision point. But really, sermons are geared towards Christians, right? And they're like, how am I applying this text in my life? Sometimes the decision is, I need to keep doing exactly what I'm doing. I'm living right. Isn't that great when that happens? But Howerton's getting people to just get married. He's talked them into that. That's not his life, it's theirs. And when you have one of these mega churches, do you think they're keeping stats on these people? These mega churches, we baptized 100 people last week. 5 years from now, do you keep up with them to see if they still go to church and they're still living for Jesus? If they ever live for Jesus? 5 years from now, are they going to keep up with how many of these people got divorced? And how many of them shouldn't have got married? No, it's a publicity stunt. And they don't care. All 50 people could leave, because you know what happens in multi-campus megachurch? When somebody leaves, somebody comes to replace them. It's just person churn. As evidenced by this Moonie marriage thing they did. Now, I want you to understand me clearly. I am not saying that if you're a pastor or a Christian and you meet somebody who's shacked up and professes Christ, that you need to say, hey, either stop professing Christ or stop being shacked up. Y'all need to get married right now. And then you marry them after some time. I'm not saying don't do that. Talking to some of these people who I might make the same decision to say, all right, let's get you married. And it doesn't have to be some big planned out expensive thing in a church or next to a waterfall or at the party barn or one of these venues that people make with a big reception afterward. The wedding I did a few weeks ago was out in the town square. And it was just me and the couple and their kid. And you know what? I think they loved it. Because they were finally getting married. Again, I don't want to tell too much of their business. So I'm not saying you have to check all these boxes. What I am saying is it's a major decision that doesn't need to be undertaken after some mega pastor manipulates you in the same way he manipulates people to get spontaneously baptized. That it's a serious spiritual decision, probably outside of salvation and baptism, the most serious spiritual decision you'll ever make in your life. And it needs to be done with some degree of reverence and holiness and forethought. And I don't think they did it that way. But guess what? They don't do church that way. When you are an attender or nominal member of the multi-site megachurch, where your pastor is more known for his Facebook clips than he is for actually knowing his congregants, that's what you get. Wrong church just breeds more wrongness. And the irony is, this guy's out there preaching about the importance of marriage and the morality of marriage, and then belittles it with his little spontaneous stunt. Just like these spontaneous baptism guys preach about how important it is to get baptized, and then they cheapen it by talking people into it, basically. So watch out for Howerton and the Moonie marriages. Thanks for listening to The Christian Commute. Lord willing, I'll be back with you again before next Tuesday. As always, God bless. And as always, remember, Christianity is not about getting saved. It's about being saved.